What I really like about you two is that you're very different in what you do in real estate. So you guys are focusing on different aspects in real estate. You also approach your business in different ways. So that'll be really good for everybody listening on how that will play out for everybody. What we're going to look to do today is look at it from two angles. So as a broker or an agent, how to make your business better, how to grow it, how to be more efficient, and then also from the buyer side, how to work with brokers better, how to increase your ability to buy units if you're not an agent or broker. So let's start off right with that. We'll do a layup. How can investors work with brokers to get deals? So how does a relationship start?
So typically nowadays the relationship starts with us is that we have people reach out to us either on social media or people reach out to us via email. Hey, we saw you on social media. We heard your name and you guys are selling a ton of investment properties. And that really typically starts that conversation. And then from there, I'd like to have kind of like an introductory conversation with somebody and learn a little bit about them, what they're looking to do, why are they interested in our market. Obviously, Milwaukee, as you all know, is a very interesting and sought after market by investors, not just within the state, but also out of state, all over the country, and even out of country investors. We've worked with people all the way down from Australia to Israel to Peru, like all over the country, all over the world, that they want to come invest in the Milwaukee market because we have lower barriers to entry as far as the price points. Cash on cash returns, cash flows are very attractive with these properties. But the key to it all is really understanding what that investor is looking for and educating them. I feel more times than not, when I learn to talk to a new investor, I want to learn about what their goals are, but I'm also trying to almost coach them and be kind of like a financial representative or a financial sponsor to them to say, I know you're hungry to pick up all these deals. You want to buy 6 properties and 10 properties. I'm like, take a breath. Slow down. And I'm literally, and it sounds goofy, right? I'm working against myself. I'm pushing back on more potential sales that I could do. But the reason being is that I want that investor to keep coming back to us and buy those 10 properties, but maybe not in the first couple months. Buy one, see how it goes. Buy a second one, see how it goes. Get those properties and your processes and your procedures seasoned in. Make sure you're comfortable with that investment, and then keep coming back for the long term. Because we've been in this business for about 20 years now, and we wouldn't keep growing, keep being who we are and growing our business and growing our client base if we just made a quick buck and be like, well, they went bankrupt or they lost money on this investment or whatever it may be. So I think the biggest thing for us is education of that investor and understanding what they're after and really helping them find that balance.
That was a great answer. I would echo just about everything he said as far as building a relationship. So a lot of this conference has been talked about networking, right? And how do you create meaningful, lasting relationships with people? A lot of times brokers are kind of seen as good guys, sometimes bad guys, people who know everybody, people who don't know anything. We get called a lot of names sometimes. But what a lot of people forget is you're building a relationship with us just as much as we're building a relationship with you. So if you come into our market, or let's say you're in our market and you would like to see deal flow from us, I mean, you're trying to win us over just as much as we're trying to win you over as a prospective client, right? So yeah, it's great for you to call me and keep calling me saying, hey, I want deals, I want to look at deals, deals. That's awesome. But until you either prove to me that you can actually close on this, or you provide me valuable feedback, or you do something to separate yourself from everyone else in this room that's calling me constantly, we're not going to get anywhere. So I think building relationships, staying in communication with brokers, providing them feedback, and then ultimately proving to them that you can in fact close is the best way to build those relationships.
Great. How'd you guys get started in real estate? Go through your journey.
So let's see. Scott Lurie was up here yesterday. He talked about We Buy Ugly Houses. Okay, so in 2008, I came to Milwaukee from northern Wisconsin. went to UW Milwaukee, and I answered a Craigslist ad to clean out basements for We Buy Ugly Houses. Wasn't affiliated with Scott, I was a different franchise owner. But that was kind of my foray into real estate. I learned a little bit about the wholesaling and flipping and Burr model before, Bigger Pockets really started pushing that. And I thought it was super cool. I thought that was all real estate was, quite frankly. I didn't even know that commercial or industrial, which I do now, was even a pathway. But I cleaned out basements. I kind of learned the ropes. The mentor that I eventually developed there, he said, why don't you check out commercial real estate? I graduated in 2012 from UW Milwaukee, and I couldn't find a job. I had a great GPA. I was a good student. I had extracurriculars, the whole thing. But we were coming out of the great financial crisis, and it was brutal to find a job. I had like 25 interviews with 22 different companies or something like that. And I ended up taking the only job I could get, which was slinging home improvement products, and I was an over-the-road salesman. So I had samples with me. I'd roll into your house, and I'd try to convince you why you should spend $25,000 to buy a kitchen remodel. I got a little burnt out with that after about a year and 40,000 miles, and I was networking. I was really just having a bunch of beers with a buddy, and he was a banker. Said, hey man, I'd love to really get into real estate, and he made a couple introductions for me. I had a few interviews, and I wound up joining my current firm, the Dickman Company, in 2013. Started as a junior broker and cold called my way into oblivion, and eventually became a partner in 2017, bought into the business. And then from there, became a principal, and the rest is kind of history. So, been about 10 years in industrial real estate. I focus on manufacturing, distribution, and transportation-related properties, primarily in southeastern Wisconsin.
Awesome. So my journey, pretty similar as far as my getting started. I actually, I didn't have to clean out basements, but I did have a pretty crummy job. I was actually an intern for my wonderful wife, Holly Speranza, who's in the crowd with us here today. And she was actually working for a Shore West agent. I remember his name, Ray Reeford. And he hired Holly straight out of college to be his marketing coordinator. And Holly comes to me one day and goes, Santi, I really want to get out in the field. I think I really like this career. And I'm like, why did you waste all this money going to college if you want to go to real estate? And more on that later, because I'm actually more guilty of that than her probably. But so she's like, hey, can you just come interview with us and this and that? And I was like, sure, yeah, I'll come help you out. And so I actually took an internship in 2006, I believe it was, making $7 an hour, whopping salary, right? And the only reason I did it is to support my future partner. Sorry, I'm an emotional guy. So, but that means a lot to me because she reached out to me and she said, look, I see something that I really want to pursue. You're going to school, you're kind of doing your odd jobs. I was always into buying things on auctions, selling things. I always liked the nature and the art of the deal. I wanted always to buy something and sell it for a profit. So that sales entrepreneurship was always within me. So I was like, okay, I'll go check this out. And so, fast forward a year later into that internship, she kind of grew out of that role, and she's like, hey, I'm going to go work at Remax. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go finish school. And I always observed her from afar. I never really dipped my toes in the real estate field for a couple years, and I would just watch her what she was doing. She worked from one of the biggest foreclosure teams in the nation, the Marketly team, back in the financial recession times in 08, 09, 2010. And I just love to see how real estate transactions were being made. So I'm like, let me help you build up this business. I'm a people person. I love talking. Obviously, that's why they invited me here today. And I started helping, build up clients. And so I would talk to everybody in the world. I'm like, hey, Holly and I are in real estate. And it was always the duo. Back then, from the very first day of us working together, we're both agents. You should buy a house with us, this and that. And we slowly started building that up over the years to the point where she was making more money from our real estate ventures and I was making more money from our real estate ventures that both of us combined were getting in a salary in our jobs. So that's when literally, 60 days after our wonderful daughter and God-sent gift to earth, our Sophia was born, We actually decided to just call it a day and open up our own real estate brokerage, which was this Root River Realty. We just started it in January 1st, 2019. And Sophia was born in November of 2018. So it's like, have a kid, start a brokerage, do all that stuff. But really, ever since then, we continued to build up our business. And over the last couple of years, as we mentioned, been the #1 agent in the entire state for transaction sides. And it was mainly Holly and myself. There was no teams. There was nobody else. We were working, grinding 20 hours a day, selling a 400 property portfolio in about 400 days, managing our consistent business. And, one of the big things that we're doing now is we partnered with another brokerage in Keller Williams. I always called Holly the #1 free agent in the real estate field. And by doing that, we've actually expanded. We brought on an assistant. We brought on a wonderful buyer's agent in Melina Cortez, and really are learning to scale our business and grow by working on the business, not in the business, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that more today.
Yeah, I was part of a few of those 400 unit transactions, and that was, yeah, I can only imagine how much time and effort that took to get those done. We love to negotiate, right? It's fun. Nick, we just talked about it the other night, just different negotiation styles, things that we can do for our clients to get the upper edge. Can we share with the audience a little bit about some inside tips and tricks, ideas?
I can go here. People ask me all the time, what's a great, way to get an advantage in real estate, or, I guess you could apply this to life, but negotiation is one of the greatest skills that you can have, right? So, if you think about what Santiago just said of, I want to take something and sell it for more, right? That's about as elementary as you can get to turn a profit. And that's the essence of real estate, right? So a book that I read a number of years ago that I often, reread or hand out to people, Never Split the Difference. If you haven't read that book, it will change the way that you look at negotiations. I have used the tactic a number of times where I'm making a ridiculous offer, I'm coming up a little bit, and then I'm going to the penny. And it's a very easy story to tell, right? It's like, look, this is the arithmetic behind the equation. This is how I arrived here. I cannot afford to pay you 1 cent more. And when a seller gets an offer like that, they're like, oh shit, like he's done his homework, right? Like he knows, like this is dialed in as close as it can. And oftentimes, that's the winning offer. So never split the difference, and I'd recommend anybody read it.
No, that's perfect. Honestly, that's one of the biggest things that we always talk about is being prepared, right? Be prepared, know your market, know what you're after, know that you're not going to let emotions drive your financial decisions. And I know that sounds so simple, but I can't tell you how many times you have a client that's like chomping at the bit and calling you and texting you and like, no, should we offer him $1,000 more? Should we go up $5,000? Like, stop. Like, no, like, look, you need to let this sit and let it simmer. And we pleaded our case, we pitched our case as far as Nick said, you've done your homework, you know what the property is worth, this is why I'm offering you this price, and let them sit. I think in Tony's presentation earlier, he said the first one to throw out the number is gonna lose. In this case, once you've made that offer, if you're basically going back and just trying to win your offer again and again, you're countering yourself. Talk about counterproductive. You can't go and counter yourself. And the other thing about it is, it's another simple adage, but treat others as you want to be treated. When I enter a negotiation with somebody, regardless of where the offer falls on the table, as far as if, they consider it to be a good offer, they consider it to be a bad offer, I treat people with respect and with kindness. And you know what? If it's a laughing matter, like, oh man, this offer is laughable, this and that. Okay, great. Well, you know what? I feel the same way, but you know what? Do you have any other offers? You don't? Let's talk about it. Why do you think it's laughable? And try to get people to open up, to talk to you. Because in a negotiation, any additional information that you can gain and you can obtain, use that to your advantage to win that negotiation and be able to get that property for yourself or for your client.
One thing I would add is don't take this personal. This is business, right? You need to always be willing to walk away from the deal. A lot of people say that they're not emotionally involved, but people in this room, you're trying to find your first deal or your fifth deal or your 100th deal. There's no deals out there right now, which we'll talk about, but you get anxious, right? And you get nervous. And you're like, oh shit, I need to make some money. I got to find a deal. So you find one, and then you get a little bit farther into it. It's like, oh, it's right on the line, and you push it a little bit farther. It's like, God damn, I don't know if I can make this one work. Now you're emotionally invested, right? You need to always have a point at which you're willing to walk away. If you don't do that, you're going to find yourself in a really tough spot.
Let's get into the lack of deals. So it's a big issue that we're all affected by. Harder to come across a good deal for sure. I mean, just hard to come across an okay deal. Off-market deals are always the sexy catch, right? I mean, you call a client, I have an off-market deal. There's no competition. That's a big way to make something happen. What are you guys seeing with off-market deals? How many do you think you're getting now versus a couple years ago? How are you finding them?
So we see a lot of off-market stuff, obviously, with our large database of buyers, sellers, and investors, agents alike. People are coming to us, texting us, sending us emails. As Tony said, right? Data is king. That data is super valuable. So we're gathering all that, and we're looking at deals on a daily basis. Deals per se, right? Quote unquote. As Nick mentioned, as Adam mentioned, the scarcity of it is it's getting a little crazy out there. But I would say before I get into what we're seeing out there, just make sure exactly to Nick's point, being willing and ready to walk away. Don't just take a deal just because you have to have something in your pipeline and you just got to make some sort of money. That's amazing advice. It's really true, because you know what? At the end of the day, it's not the right deal for you, and there's always, no matter what happens, there's always going to be somebody out there that's willing to earn less than you're willing to earn, and let them take that risk. If it's not the right deal, walk away. But in regards to what we're seeing right now is a lot of the off-market stuff. I don't know if we call it like a new tax or whatever it may be, but it seems like a lot of the deals that are being presented to us as deals, they're just asking some crazy prices. But, I guess 2 years ago, to backtrack a little bit, we're seeing these off-market deals, and they really were deals because people are just coming across so many of them that they weren't taxing them as much, meaning like the assignment fees and the wholesaling. So take a deal that a wholesaler picks up for 50. You probably could have picked it up for 55, 60, something like that. They were just happy to get their quick buck, move on to the next one, because there's just so much in their pipeline. They weren't too worried about making a killing on every single deal because of the scarcity of it. Nowadays, you're seeing something that maybe they're picking up for 50 and they're asking 90. But what I can tell you, it's two things about that. Number one, don't be afraid to negotiate. Because if you're turned off by the fact that, how the heck are they coming up with this valuation? There's nothing wrong with negotiating a deal like that. You're like, no, I think you're crazy. I mean, I'll give you 70 or I'll give you 71. The other thing we're seeing is because of that, is that we're seeing something called, I guess I've heard the name used called tail selling, which is the reverse of wholesaling. So we have a lot of clients nowadays that are picking up these wholesale deals, and before the ink is even dry on the deed, we're turning around and we're putting it on the market. And a lot of retail buyers are picking these things up. And of course, it doesn't matter what someone else puts in their pocket, but as we all know, that's one of the negotiating tools people like to use. Well, you only paid this. Well, what does it matter to you what I paid? It matters to you what you're willing to pay for it and what it's on the market for. So those are two things that we're seeing as far as crazy pricing, because people are getting less deals. They're trying to get more out of it. I would just say, don't be afraid to negotiate that, but move fast. Because if you're looking to pick something up like that and they were getting a lot of attraction or not, try to do the tail selling where you're trying to turn and burn, move them faster. You might make a little less, but you'll eventually keep the wheels moving on the bus.
So I would say every deal that anyone buys or that anybody sees, it starts as an off-market deal, right? So if you think about how a deal comes to market or comes across your desk, it starts typically with somebody like me out there, banging on doors, making cold calls, working the streets, trying to turn over these stones to find an opportunity. Once I find that opportunity, depending on the situation, I'm going to make them a pitch on making this a full-blown listing, or depending on their preferences and their tolerance for visibility, we may do a very short list of qualified buyers who I have relationships with, right? So people who say, I don't buy stuff on market, right? Or I only search for off-market deals, it's kind of like, okay, right? Well, who do you know that's going to bring you one, right? So again, going back to networking and relationship building, buying an on-market deal isn't necessarily a worse deal than finding something off-market, right? You may come across an opportunity that was overpriced, it's sat, right? Maybe we're, 90 days in or 180 days in and nothing has happened. You find a way to make that deal work, right? You shop better terms of financing, you bring in a JV partner, you figure out an improvement plan or something to boost rents, whatever it may be. There's great deals to be found on market. And for the off-market opportunities, I would tell you, if you establish a relationship with somebody, so for example, if somebody calls me and they say, hey, I want to see off-market deals. If I send you something, I need to hear back from you immediately, right? Like within 24 hours, I need real feedback on the deal. I need to know, one, if you're interested, and two, who you're going to finance it with, who's the general contractor for the project, what are your numbers looking like, right? Because this is like gold to me, right? As a broker, like this is how I earn a living and put, food on the table for my family. I don't want to waste time, one, but waste an opportunity with somebody who can't perform for one reason or another. So building relationships, you need to prove your credibility. A great way to do that is to communicate and do that quickly.
It's a good point that an off-market deal doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good deal, right? I mean, the reason that it's an off-market deal could be for the exact opposite reason, is that it's not worth listing, right? And so if it's off-market because it's low chance and you guys don't want to put a ton of effort into it that way. Yeah. Okay, pricing in the future, cap rates. Bill spoke yesterday and great information, but he scared us a little bit with his future outlook, at least in the short term. We're told real estate, no matter what, is always going to be a safe, sound investment, but there's some whispers and there's some stuff that's out there now that scare us a little bit. What's your outlook on how things are going to be in 1, 2, 10 years?
Great. Buy real estate today. Real estate is the best long-term investment, in my opinion. I understand that there's headwinds working against us, and who knows where we're going to be 10 years from now, or tomorrow for that matter. But I would say if you can find a deal today and it pencils, right? You can buy it at a price that it makes sense. You're cash flowing pretty close to the first day. You have a nice LTV. You're comfortable with the guarantee terms. Buy that real estate. Because let's say that interest rates do eventually come down. I'm not an economist. I don't know which direction they're going, but let's say they do come down. Everyone who's been sitting on the sidelines and using the excuse of, well, interest rates are too high, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to buy real estate, right? So it's inevitably going to create competition. It's going to drive prices up, and you're going to be maybe even in a tougher spot to find a deal, in the future. So, we're all here because we like the benefits of real estate: appreciation, depreciation, debt pay down, cash flow. The list goes on. And so I encourage people to do deals now. It's a great time to find the things that are sitting on the market. Maybe negotiate a little bit better price and make a deal with somebody who wasn't willing to make a deal 6 months ago.
I echo exactly what you just said. The time to buy is now. Like, nobody has a crystal ball. The Fed's talking about, oh, they're going to raise rates a little more, this and that. Okay, great. What's another 1% or whatever it may be? But that 1% is not what you should be worried about. It shouldn't be the rate, because to Nick's point, rates could keep going higher. They could drop. Right now, what I see in the industry is that we're essentially in kind of like a what's going on, like kind of like a cool period. We just had two of the most stupidest, and pardon my French, but two of the most stupidest years in real estate that I've seen in my entire life. And I've been on this earth for 42 years, so I'm sure there's many of you that have been on doing this for much longer than we have. But I can't recall from talking to anybody, older than me, younger than me, that has seen any sort of real estate years that like we've seen the last 2 years. Anyone with a pulse and a piece of paper that says I'm an agent could have sold properties the last 2 years. The difference is going to come in like these years, this year, next year, and so forth, on the people that are going to work harder. They're going to hustle harder. Shout out to Tony Romero, and and they're really going to put in the work to, like, as Adam and Nick have mentioned, to find those deals, identify it's if a good deal or not, and make sure that you're essentially buying in a sound investment. If you look at the historical data of real estate, it's got an appreciation rate on average of 4% per year. That's not going to just magically disappear. Of course, it's not a 4% that just keeps ticking up, 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 up. Obviously some years are higher, some years are lower. But in the long term, real estate, you're not making more land. This isn't the Netherlands where they're doing dredging and creating more land. We're in the United States. The land we have is all we have. Scoop it up while it's still available, because the prices are going to keep going up eventually.
Another point on that with pricing. So in the construction world, we do a lot of development of Class A industrial facilities. The cost of construction is not coming down, okay? It has maybe flattened out. Certain materials, steel and concrete are my big products. Those will vary a little bit. Maybe we've seen a correction of 5% or 8%. But if you're talking about a significant price change, I don't think it's going to happen. The U.S. economy would have to go into the dirt for construction costs to come down, because specifically for industrial, demand still far outpaces supply. And so you have people that are continuing to compete over available materials to build buildings, which we have waiting lists to fill in certain markets and certain scenarios. So again, buy it today, because things are not getting cheaper, in my opinion.
So we can all agree, if rates go down, a bigger boom than what we experienced a couple years ago is probably in store, okay? But what if rates don't come down? What if rates keep going up and construction doesn't go down? What if that keeps going up, right? Insurance, everything is going up. How does real estate continue to grow? We have to put that burden on the tenant. I mean, so at what point, though, is that push going to be a little too much? You guys are saying that flat is going to be okay for a while, that you don't necessarily see a short-term dip.
I would tell you from a new construction standpoint, we have slowed down. We haven't stopped, but we've slowed down, because similar to multifamily, which I think a lot of people here work in, as your cost goes up, your rent has to go up, right? I mean, this is a pretty simple equation. Can people afford to pay what it is you're delivering? If the answer is no, you're not going to build anything, right? However, we have a housing demand. We have an affordable housing demand like crazy, and we have a demand, or a high demand for industrial real estate, which we lack supply of. So even though we're starting to kind of slow down here, the demand remains relatively strong. So it will probably flatten out. It might be a year, might be a couple of years where there just aren't a lot of deals happening. But if history, at least rhymes, at some point things will pick back up. We'll hit that equilibrium where people can afford to pay the prices that are being charged, and things will keep going.
Agreed. I mean, I see the same thing in the residential side of the business. Even not so much looking at deals to be had. I mean, I do echo what Nick said as far as the amount of deals. I think they're going to be far and few between. But it's more so taking the opportunity to revive a property, or really reassess the situation as far as that, like he talked about, the demand for property. So in the industrial side, there's the demand for occupying those buildings. In the residential and multifamily side of the business, there's that demand that people are always going to need a place to live. I mean, Adam and his team probably know this best as far as, what are your times and turns as far as, getting tenants in a property, as far as turning a unit, can you raise the rents? Looking at those unique opportunities and those points to say, okay, we were getting 900. Let's see, how long is it going to take us if we push that rent to 950, or do we have to bring it back down to 925? I mean, having that volume and looking at that additional data and gathering that and understanding it, I think is going to be the key to understanding what kind of deals you can have out there, and what kind of opportunities can you keep going after, as far as, refreshing what you have, or looking for new deals and then trying to mimic what other places in the market, essentially your competition are doing.
Yeah, landlords working together, whether we know it or not, by raising rents and creating the comps, and it just kind of keeps moving forward. Okay, so younger buyers, myself included, so 2010, 2011, and newer, right? We don't know what we don't know, what we haven't experienced other than watching The Big Short and reading a couple books, right? So what hurdles are coming? What advice for that newer investor?
Build the relationships with banks now. Oh, you should have built them 2 years ago. Finding debt, the finance panel yesterday, I mean, those are the guys that you should be talking to. Ricky Schneider and Matt Sell, those guys can move mountains. Anybody out here, if you're getting started and you think a bank is going to give you money, it's going to be a very hard lesson for you to learn. Yes, you can get something financed. I don't want to discourage you, but banks are incredibly strict today on what they're willing to lend, what the loan to values are, the types of guarantees. I mean, a few years ago, you could have burn off guarantees on stuff, right? It's like, all right, well, I'm going to hit a certain hurdle for lease up. My guarantee drops to 50%, right? I mean, you don't see that stuff today. So build the relationships with the people that you're going to need to make these transactions. Also, you know, as you're building them with the banks, again, building them with brokers, you got to have that deal flow and you got to have the capital to put these deals together.
100% agree on building relationships. Obviously, a little late to the party, like Nick mentioned, as far as getting to the banks. But I think what I'm seeing now, as of late, is more of that creative financing, right? So be more open-minded to, be it a seller financing deal, or, you know, what I'm seeing now in a lot of these transactions is actually a dual lender approach. And I don't know how many people in this room are probably on my, you know, email update that I send out every couple weeks, but I talked about it this week in the new debt program that we came across, where you get your DSCR lender that puts up the first 80% LTV on the property, and then you work with a secondary lender, a private lending program that will actually set you up for that additional 15% LTV on the property. So then you can basically acquire 2 DSCR loans. One, obviously the standard loan for the property with PITI, the traditional principal, interest, taxes, insurance. And then the second lender, an interest-only loan, 3 to 4 year balloon payments, obviously a little higher interest rate, still more affordable than hard money, but you're able to acquire properties, you know, on essentially on a debt like that for as little as 5% down. So I'm seeing stuff like that come across, you know, our desks a lot more often now, because people are trying to become a little more creative. Also, we're seeing, back to the seller financing part of it, we're seeing a lot of sellers saying, you know what, I actually picked this up for a really great price. I'm okay giving someone 3 to 5 years on, you know, 15, 20% to get the deal done, and still getting these peaks of the market, and then still collecting, you know, on the majority of their investment, on their principal they put in to buy that original deal, if not more, and then taking that little bit of the risk on, you know, footing the bill for, you know, providing the financing to that buyer.
One thing I would add, so people who are starting, you know, maybe they're 10 years in the business, we've only, as have I've only seen great times, right? Like, I was not here in 07, 08, 09 when shit hit the fan. We're going back into another period where things are slowing down. It's harder to make deals. It's harder to get money. If you can't find a deal right now, do something adjacent, right? You need to stay in the industry. This is a long-term game, okay? So you need to be attending masterminds, coming to events like this, networking. I mean, if you haven't met 5 to 10 people in here and already added them on social, or got their email, or got their card, was this really, you know, a win for you from a networking perspective, right? So like, that's the mindset you should have during these periods where it's, you know, harder to find deals, or real estate is slowing down. What else can you do to stay involved? Build that track record, even though you don't have deals, you know, build those relationships, so when you do eventually find something, you're ready to rock.
Quick comment on your last statement with the seller financing. As annoying as it is, it's becoming more popular, and there's some tax advantages to the seller in also accepting that. I mean, it was not a thing at all a couple years ago when they didn't need to do it and everybody was buying everything at ridiculous prices. Now that we are where we are, it is a important strategy that I'm unfortunately going to have to adapt to. More paperwork and more headache, but it's how we get it done. Marketing. You guys are very different in how you approach. Nick, you're a cold caller. How do you market to get clients, to get sellers, to grow your business?
So it's about as basic of I'm trying to become more sophisticated, but my first day in the office, I was handed a box of business cards and they said, don't come back until they're gone or you have a deal. My day still consists of driving through industrial parks, walking up to the building and walking right inside and saying, hi, my name is Nick. I'm a real estate broker. I just got a new listing in the area. So wondering if somebody's around that I can chat with. Maybe you guys would have some interest in the property, right? I don't know, 10, 12, sometimes 20 hours a week is spent doing that. So I find that with my product and the type of clientele, that's the best way for me to get in front of them. I've been ramping up my LinkedIn. I don't have I'm not on Instagram. I don't have Twitter or X, whatever it is. I'm not on Facebook, but I decided like 18 months ago to go all in on LinkedIn. So I've been getting a lot of positive feedback from that. Again, for my clientele, my demographic is manufacturing, warehousing within a 2-hour radius of Milwaukee. Those business owners tend to be, let's say, over the age of 50, white and conservative. And so you're targeting a very specific group of people. And so with anything that you're doing, I would recommend, figuring out who your demographic is, figuring out the best platform or way to chase those people, and then focus on that, as opposed to a shotgun approach where, I'm doing a million different things. It's like, all right, I'm going to make cold calls, and for social, I'm going to use LinkedIn.
So yeah, our approach is definitely different, but I get it. I mean, and I applaud Nick's efforts on LinkedIn because that really is more of a professional setting, higher end, deals and things like that. So that does fit your business model exactly to the T as far as who your clientele you're looking for is. For us, obviously the big push that really kind of was I call it our calling card per se. Because we've been in the industry for the last 15 years, but it really was that 400 property portfolio. A lot of people, looked at us and were like, "Oh, these guys are a one-trick pony." I've heard that said about us many times, and you know what? That just fuels me to work harder and do more deals and be a better version of myself and have a better team and have more production. But back to the portfolio, that was a long-term client that we had worked with for the last 12 years. We helped him build half of that portfolio. And, I don't know how many in this room saw the market in around May of 2021. Well, when you saw on Father's Day weekend, who the hell is Root River Realty and how the hell did they just do 100 listings in one day? That was me, sitting at the coffee table with a laptop and just cranking out listings. The Saturday before Father's Day, I was putting all the contracts together. Put 96 listings in on Father's Day in 2021, and that really started just boosting our presence on social media, in MLS, in the marketplace. Agents were calling Holly and myself like, how did you guys get all these listings? I'm like, oh, just wait, there's 300 more, but Santi just got tired and he had to take a nap. And then he kept going the next day and started putting on more listings to the tune of 400 listings. But the key to that all was the fact that we utilized all that presence on the market and we shifted the Milwaukee market at that time, and we literally started gathering all that information and started working with it and not against it. So we're gathering email addresses, we're gathering phone numbers, and so we started marketing to people. I don't call it really a newsletter, it was just a market update. I built a massive spreadsheet. I'm sure many of you in this room probably saw, Adam saw my spreadsheet. And what I do is I make it simple for people to do business with us. I give you all the information for the deal. So I give you the rent, the taxes, the zip code, the address, a blurb about the property, the MLS number, bedroom, bath count, everything in this wonderful spreadsheet with our our logo on there to make sure you call us. And we started using that, and that really was essentially our quote unquote social media. I love Excel, I love financials, so we built that out. And then we started going on Facebook more, like, oh, hey, let's build up a Facebook page for Root River Realty and really push that out there. And so we started running ads on these properties. And this is not glamorous. I'm sure you guys and gals have seen our listings.
It's not.
I mean, we're talking $25,000, $50,000. I don't mind getting my hands dirty, neither does Holly, but we ground it out, and we literally were cranking out all these properties and built a system around it, and people started coming to us, and they were asking, asking about the properties. And now, as of recently, because of all that success with selling the portfolio, we're still getting people that are like, hey, I'm on your email list. I don't know how I ended up there, but I got 8 properties to sell, or I got 6 properties to sell. And so a lot of it has been because of the fact that we built up a presence. I hashtag called us the portfolio people, and different kind of names like that. And it's just like, call us whatever you want, but you'll never call me late to dinner, and you'll never call me lazy, because I can guarantee you we'll get that property sold, and that's what we promise clients. And that reputation has continued to flow in based on our results. So I can tell you, it's just, provide something that nobody else is providing, and be consistent and keep putting it out there. And for us, it's been Facebook. Similar to Nick, I don't even have an Instagram account. So I know Tony was talking about Instagram earlier. I probably have to get on there someday, but that's why I hired my little brother to help run our social media, because he's Tony's age. So hopefully, being a young 20-year-old, he can figure out how to do all that stuff for us. But essentially, Facebook is our gold mine.
You used the term not glamorous. I don't know if you meant the properties or the process.
A little bit of both.
But the process, this is not glamorous, right? A lot of times people are like, oh God, you real estate brokers driving Mercedes and flying on planes and all this stuff. It's super cool. This is trench warfare, right? I mean, like, we are in the trenches making calls. And yeah, Tony's a beast, man. I don't know if he's still here. Hats off to you for taking social and being able to do what you have. For everybody else, if you're not socially inclined like that, pick up the phone. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, I make hundreds and hundreds of calls a day. I should say a week now. When I first got started, I would average about 100 to 120 calls a day. New calls, organic calls, right? I'm calling on lists. I'm calling from the cold calls I just got from people. There's not necessarily a trick to what we do. It's repetition, right? Can you take notes? Can you build a CRM? Can you constantly stay in front of people? And if you choose the brokerage path and you go all in on being a broker, that's what you get really good at. So it seems like, oh shit, these guys, they can just pull a deal out of their hat like a magician. Well, it's like, well, I did 1,000 reps to get here, right? I made all of these phone calls to make this happen. So again, if you want to find deals, you can make calls yourself. If you want to, hit the easy button, call a broker. But it's about repetition and about persistence.
I don't have an Instagram either, so I think we're all three kind of old souls, old school for sure. I mean, you're cold calling. That's crazy to me that that's great. So kind of to the next topic with that, Zillow I took it as an attack to kill real estate agents, right? Good news is they failed, but I see all the effort, right? The effort that we all put in, you guys are talking about. How can other technology companies, right? I mean, there's always going to be a push to kill real estate agents to get rid of the commission, but I mean, we're in the trenches. We're making sure the clients are understanding the right numbers and being taken care of. I mean, is that a concern for either of you at all? I mean, what's the pros and cons, like, in your head of how does technology hurt us?
I can go. My industry, so being commercial and specifically industrial, we've started to see auction services become a very big part of the industry in a way to eliminate brokerage. And it's just like any other auction that you'd think, right? You take a bunch of pictures of the building and put it up there and let people bid on it. What technology misses is the art of the deal, right? And the art of the deal, the artist is the broker, okay? And I'm not saying that to like pat myself on the back, but we are a buffer, Okay, so we are there to make sure that the buyer and the seller doesn't talk to each other. Because a lot of times they get pissed off at each other, right? And he's like, oh, well, he just tried to retrade me, right? Screw this guy. It's like, well, maybe there's something going on there. Let's just cool off and separate a little bit. And you're also that punching bag, right? So again, something goes sideways. As the broker, right? It's like I get paid to, get kicked in the teeth, basically. Or people just yell at me all day long. And I smile, right? It's like, oh, I totally feel the situation, right? It's like, I got it, it's cool, don't worry about it. And then I turn around and yell, right? But it's part of the business, and we act as that buffer, and we help just kind of gently push the deal forward. And also, you'll hit these inflection points in transactions, right, where you're at a stalemate, and it's like, what do we do? And as a broker, you kind of sit there and you're like, okay, how can we make this happen, right? The seller's like, I'm only going to take this price. The buyer's like, I can't afford to pay anymore. And you're like, how do we get creative, right? Can we do some seller financing, right? Can we extend due diligence? Can some of the earnest money go hard? Can we bundle this with something else? What are the other options that we have? So to circle back to technology, I do think that the brokers who have only made the easy layup deals, haven't had to work that hard, I do think tech will eventually replace them for the most part, but it's the guys that can add value and solve problems from a brokerage standpoint will continue to be needed in the industry.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I have actually a name that I call it for myself as far as that part of the business, and I simply call it the human factor. You can't replace humans. I mean, you got this Chat GPT stuff and all this AI and all the stuff that's coming out, and that's great, right? It's to Nick's point, it's probably going to replace kind of the bottom tier agents and brokers that really aren't putting in the effort and thinking that they're going to come into this industry, make a quick buck, and call it a day. I mean, how many people have posted about the stuff that 56,000 agents have quit this year? Good for you. Thank you. That's more money for me and my partners in this industry. Get out of the way. I'm going to keep working hard and doing what I'm doing. And if you don't want to call those clients back, I'll gladly take them, But I mean, don't be so worried about what everybody else is doing, and focus on being the best version of yourself. And talking about that human factor, we're actually at our customer appreciation event last night at our house. That's why we couldn't be here last night, which I was really bummed about, honestly. But I had a client tell me something that just stuck with me. That's what I'm going to share with you today. And he came up to me and he said, you make me feel like I'm important. And I'm like, can you shed a little light on that? And he's like, I'm not a big fish. I have maybe 7, 8 properties. We sold one on market. We sold one off market. It was kind of cool. We did bookends. We closed one on Monday and one on Friday. He had a great week. And he showed up to our event. And he's like, you reply to me, to my texts, to my calls consistently. It's like immediately, as soon as I text you, you're hitting me back, or you're talking to me and you're talking me through this. And I got frustrated a few times in a transaction. He's like, thank you for making me feel like you actually care and you're present, and that you made me feel important. I'm like, of course. And I said, I'm a goofy guy. I think Adam knows me a lot. A couple people in this room know me as well as far as my personal side. I'm very different in the way we run our business than traditional and most people, right? I am who I am. No apologies are going to be given because I'm a goofy guy. I have a crazy, kooky personality, but I have fun doing what I'm doing, and for God's sake, I'm very passionate about what we're doing, and I apply that to every single one of my clients to make sure they know that they feel appreciated, that they feel important. So to talk about the technology does not have feelings. Technology can't replace humans to be present for somebody. Like Nick said, right? He gets kicked in the teeth sometimes. I get punched in the gut. So we're in this similar situation. I mean, we've had to be financial counselors. I'm sure we've been marriage counselors before because
psychiatrists, therapists, constantly. Yeah.
Exactly,
I know more about people's wives and kids than they would tell anybody else. It's
exactly.
crazy.
So the thing is that you can't replace that. You can't replace care, passion, and the ability to do that. So regardless of what technology develops and how it comes out and what it maybe shapes some part of the industry, But for the true hardcore agents and brokers that are out there that are living, breathing, eating this every single day, there's nothing to worry about as long as you keep being yourself.
One great takeaway from what Santiago just said is he mentioned the client that thanked him right at this party, and for the reasons that he gave, being heard and taking time and whatnot. That relationship, he built trust, right? So now Santiago is seen as the trusted advisor, okay? So if he gets into a rough patch in one of these transactions with that client, the client is going to listen to him, right? He is going to take his advice, he's going to let him lead the way kind of through this, and it's because he took the time, right? If you look at elementary sales, okay, you should never have to close somebody, hard close somebody, meaning that like I sit down and we lock eyes and I don't talk first, right? Nobody wants to do that. And if you do your job up until that point, you don't have to, because you have buy-in from the client, right? You have the customer trusting you. The customer believes in the product, and they've already decided that they're going to buy it from you. And that starts with being heard and communication and everything that he mentioned.
Definitely less worried about it now that Zillow failed. I mean, I think they already threw in the towel and it was a big fail, but I mean, there is a little bit of that could happen, and really the only people who are going to win in that scenario are, the attorneys, and the attorneys don't need any more of that help. What the best day, the best deal, the best activity you've had? Like, what's the one memorable, oh, that was cool, I love what I do?
The day I met you.
Give me a hug.
Hug it out.
My favorite story to tell. So again, going back to making cold calls. So I was like maybe, 3 years into the business. And I don't know if anybody knows where Mayville, Wisconsin is. If you drive out of Madison, go up through Columbus, and then cut across, it's in the middle of nothing. I mean, there's just farm fields and cows around. And that was my first big listing. I had a 400,000 square foot building. It was at 403 Degner Way. It used to be Mayville Products Company. And I cold called the entire county. I mean, I made 800 calls on this registry from economic development. It's everybody that I could find. I couldn't get anybody to come look at it. And so I, started driving around and then making a little bit bigger of a lap. And then all of a sudden I wound up in West Bend, Wisconsin, which is 40 miles away from there, something like that. And I walked into this little business. Maybe they use 10,000 square feet. And they had just been acquired by this large German company, this massive manufacturing conglomerate. And I walked in, I said, hi, my name is Nick, real estate broker, I have this listing. And she, the woman I spoke with just goes, hold on, 1 second. And this little tiny guy walks out from this back room, thick German accent. And, we start talking, and he just goes, we just bought this business. I need about 400,000 square feet. That's awesome. Okay? That's awesome. So I'm like, oh shit, don't screw this up, right? And so he was like, you know what? I got the perfect building for you. And so, we exchanged conversations. We ended up setting up a tour the next day, right? I cleared my schedule. I was like, this is the deal. And we had him out there. It took about 2 months, but I ended up signing a 400,000 square foot lease in Mayville, Wisconsin. I mean, that is crazy. And that's the power of cold calling, right? I never would have been there. Those guys never even would have been on my list of people to call, but I was out banging on doors, right? I was out shaking hands and trying to make friends and trying to get the word out about the product. So it just shows that, you got to be out there making these connections to find the deals.
That's awesome. I mean, my story is not as cool as Nick's, but it is financially motivated, so it'll give us a little bit of motivation. But I do know Mayville, by the way, because that's not in my head. Because actually, my buddy who actually just got married last weekend for the 3rd time, he was married the 2nd time in Mayville, and leaving Mayville, I got a ticket for my window tint. So they really have nothing to do up there. That's a true story. There's nothing there but farm fields and cops. But anyway, so. I think our story for us is when we first hit our biggest check for real estate ever, We are part of that 400 property portfolio. Obviously, one of the key benefits of really being responsive and putting yourself out there is that our double pop rate, and for those of you who don't know what a double pop is that's when the listing agent is also the buyer's agent, so you're getting both sides of the commission. It was about 66% on that portfolio. So it was incredible. I really, truthfully, did not sleep for about 2 years. Yes, sir.
That's huge. That's crazy.
It was nuts. It was nuts. Holly's like, "You have a daughter?" I'm like, "Yes, I love her very much. Here's a kiss, Sophie. Daddy's gonna go sell more real estate to pay for your college someday." But anyways, back to the story. The first big deal we hit, it was 37 townhomes over by 105th and Hampton, and that entire area. This gentleman was picking up all 37. Of course, he used us to be his buyer's agent. And when we got that closing, we got that check. It was our first check ever in our lives, over $100,000. And it might be corny. I mean, I'm not trying to sound douchey, but it's like, to us, we never before this have seen money like that before. Obviously, we've had a successful business, but to get a check for over $100,000 at once, we've never seen that before. So typically to what we did, it was like kind of still COVID was going on, so you're not going to the bank or anything like that. So we take our Chase mobile app, scan the front, scan the back, and there's an error.
Won't deposit.
I start freaking out.
Deposit limit's too big. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Deposit limit, $100,000. The check was for about $128,000. But in that instant, before I actually read the fine print, I started going to a panic attack. They gave us a false check. Holly, call entitled. Where's Jackie Brown? Freaking out. And for those who know Jackie, she's a wonderful woman. The check was fine. But yes, it was over the deposit limit. But it's like that moment right there, it's just that euphoric feeling. You're just like, good Lord, like all the stress, all the hard work, all the grind, literally, and I'm not joking or exaggerating when I tell you this, 18 to 20-hour days consistently, it just started to pay off. And that was just truly an amazing feeling outside of the mini panic attack, of course.
One more follow-up question, and then we'll get you guys involved. So think of a couple questions, and we'll do those. But with the double pop is one of the best terms in the industry for us. So with that, as a buyer who doesn't have an agent, right? What that value, I always thought it mattered, but somebody were to call or want to work with you directly versus working with a buyer's agent. If there's a relationship with a buyer's agent, I really believe you should always keep your relationship strong. That's how you get the good off-market deals. That's how things do come to you. But if you don't, if you're not one of those people that commit to an agent and you go and just wherever the deal comes, what value is there to calling you directly, right? Knowing that, one, it's easier, a direct line of communication. You lose one channel of the game of telephone, but also knowing that the double pop is coming, right? Is it valuable to work directly with the listing agent?
Okay, so I mean, that's a question that I always got, because when people asked about dual representation, which is the actual technical term in the offer to purchase but we like to call it double pop because it just sounds a lot cooler, obviously. But they ask well, how can you represent my best interests and the seller's best interests, right? And that's a valid question, right? People want to know that you're going to fight for them as much as you're going to fight for the seller, And I think I don't want to call it a wrong answer, but I've heard so many other agents and brokers say this, and even though it's true, I think there's a more finessed way to approach it. I've heard people say, well, I'm neutral. I'm in Switzerland. I basically take your information and giving it to the seller, and seller information, giving it to the buyer. Well, to Adam's point, right, that's the exact question. What value are you providing? If you're going to do that, there's no real value. So the way we approached it, when I'm speaking to Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, I say, well, you know what? I know exactly what the seller is thinking, and I can help you and guide you throughout that transaction. And then to the seller, hey, I know exactly what the buyer is thinking. I can help you to make sure that we seal the deal and get you terms that you want to agree to and eventually get the deal done. And that's really, and being truthful about it. Not just saying that to save face and say, oh, well, yeah, let me just tell them whatever they want to hear so I can just get over half of this portfolio sold by ourselves and not have to worry about a co-broke. it was truthful and it was genuine, because we really had the least amount of issues as far as getting to closing, getting through inspections, getting through all the other contingencies when we control more of the transaction. And that really was the best part of it, because what's the saying they do about a negotiation, right? The best price for something to be sold at or whatever when a transaction is closed is that the seller feels like they should have got more, and the buyer feels they should have paid less. That means that was a good and fair negotiation, because both sides thinking that they need to give or they need to take, but they're kind of like, they're still a little wishy-washy. That's a fair negotiation for both parties. And that's what we really did try to provide. A seller would, want to squeeze more out of a buyer was trying to squeeze more out of the seller. We got it to a certain point where like, look, you wanted this price, you got this. Same thing to the seller. Hey, you wanted this price, you got this. And it essentially made the best out of those situations and still were able to provide value. And to this day, I might add, a lot of those clients are still working with us. Some don't, that's just clients come and go. I have full transparency. But, a lot of those people that came to us because we had the portfolio are still working with us either to list their properties, buy new properties, or whatever it may be. So the key importance there is make sure that you provide that value.
That was a great explanation. Commercial within southeastern Wisconsin is drastically different than residential or maybe even multifamily. We don't do rep agreements. There's no buyer's rep agreement. There's no tenant rep agreement. I don't sign anything with anybody except for a listing contract or a leasing contract, right, with the seller, confirming that I get paid. So I look at this as when a seller hires me to sell their property, they're hiring me to sell their property, right? And so, yes, will I keep their best interests in mind? Will I maintain my fiduciary responsibility? Absolutely. But they want me to bring an honest, fair, and as high-priced of an offer as I can, right? And so when I'm going out and I'm soliciting buyers and I'm bringing groups through and orchestrating tours and all of that, if I can simplify this process, right, if I can talk directly to that buyer, it typically creates the smoothest transaction, right? And for any of you that have worked deals, overcomplicating stuff or dragging out the timeline on these deals, it kills it every single time. And so if you can remove those, barriers, if you can communicate directly between the parties, it usually results in both sides getting a fair deal.
Yeah, great. All right, guys and gals, please help me out. Questions?
Hi guys, I would be interested in the most creative deal you put together.
Brain buster.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about it. There's a lot of deals, obviously, right?
Go ahead. Yeah.
They'll give you right. It's actually Holly's deal, but I was with her, doing this deal. This actually goes back a lot of years, but it's the best example I can come up with. I'm sure there's others, but this is probably going back to like 2009, 2010. So Holly was representing the parents of a friend who were selling their single-family home, and we were obviously newer to the industry, probably 3 to 4 years in at that time, and we go look at the property and we see this gaping crack in the foundation, and not the step cracks or anything, like it's through the cinder blocks. So you can imagine how much pressure to crack those bricks. And we're like, hey, you're gonna have a hard time selling this. And this wasn't a market, to Nick's point, right? The financial turmoil of 08, 09, it was still being felt in 10, 11, so on and so forth. So my point there is that you weren't having all these cash buyers coming to the table ready and willing to buy, $150,000 property on 75th and Carmen, for example, right? So what Holly actually came up with, and I'll give her kudos for this because this really was her idea, she actually talked to the sellers and said, hey, look, this is what we should do. Let's get a foundation report out here, a foundation specialist, out here. Troy Beasley, amazing guy, Ace Home Inspectors. If you haven't heard of him, the guy is truly amazing. He comes out, does a basement report, and says, yeah, it's probably going to be about $18,000 to do this basement. Okay, now we have that information. So we're like, instead of hiding it or saying in the condition report and being limited about the information, what we did is we leaned into it. And what I mean by that is we put it on MLS. You know what? Foundation needs repairs. Seller willing to complete repairs prior to closing. Now that's where the fun part begins, right? So there is a little bit of a risk here, but it actually ended up being a good story. So what we did is we got an offer. At the time, the banks were a little more lenient on the conventional financing and allowed it to, still essentially pass almost like a first round of an appraisal. Once they bet all the contingencies, they brought in Gaddish Foundation repairs. They did the repairs 5 days before closing, reappraised the property a couple days before we closed, signed off on everything, and actually the Gaddish was actually willing to get paid out of the seller's proceeds at closing. So yes, while there was a little bit of a risk, the risk was only experienced by the seller for about 3 days, because there's about $20,000 in basement repairs on a $150,000 property. That's a lot of money. And the sellers, that was the thing, right? They didn't have that kind of cash readily available to go pay for this. So everybody had to lean in, trust each other. And, in those days, I'm sure, I don't know how many people remember back in, 2010, 2011, but you probably see a lot more of stuff like that happening to this day. Back then, it was unheard of. Like, it was, to do stuff like that because everyone was so wound up about what's going to happen to real estate. We're just coming out of this huge blow up, and what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And it turned out to be a great story. A wonderful lady and her daughter bought the property, and for what I know, they probably still live there to this day. But it was a really great strategy to help out your client and also ensure you're helping out the buyer.
Was the question creative strategies, or what was the question? Okay. I feel like every deal we have to get a little bit creative, just because, especially within industrial real estate, we're dealing with so many different factors. One of them we often come across is environmental issues, which is something that's not ever really questioned in residential or multifamily. Manufacturing is a very dirty business, right? Oftentimes, guys used to just dump whatever that came off the machine right down the drain, and that causes problems. We also have extremely large CapEx costs, right? Just like you do for multifamily, but roofs and parking lots. And so, like last week, for example, we're selling a building over in the Madison market right now. It's like a $15 million transaction. It's 250,000 square feet industrial building. A roof replacement on a building like that is like 1.7 million, something like that, to put a new roof on the building. So we're under contract, we're going through due diligence, we were out there last week, and roof condition report comes back, roof shot, okay? Like, I was inside, it's raining inside the building. It's in very, very poor condition. And so the buyer goes, well, we're going to terminate the deal. It's too big of a lift, we can't afford to model it with the roof cost. And so I put my broker hat on. I said, all right, like, how can we get through this? And their problem was they couldn't finance the $1.7 million roof. They had to come out of pocket for it. And so what we ended up doing is the group that was selling it, they're leasing the building back. They had, I think, 5 or 7 years on their lease. We went back to them and proposed a 15-year lease. In exchange for giving us a 15-year lease, we will put a brand new roof on the building. That amount of lease term allowed the buyer to finance. They got the bank comfortable with making that type of additional investment into the property. And it turned out to be a win-win, and we got through it. And it slightly changes the math of the deal, but both parties are happy. So again, not to pat ourselves on the back, but having a broker that can maybe suggest those other options, or we've been doing this for 10 years, 20, 25 years. We've seen a lot of stuff, right? We've come up with a lot of creative solutions. So every deal takes a little bit of finesse.
One more from the audience, and then I'll have a final one. Anybody else?
Gaddish still does that too.
We got one back here. What are your rules of thumb for follow-up when you're prospecting to owners?
I do 135. So I make the cold call the first day. I do, like I said, a lot of door knocking, right, where I'm physically walking in a property. So the first day after, I follow up with a phone call. If I don't talk to them, I leave a voicemail. The third day after, I make another phone call and leave another voicemail. And the fifth day after, if I still haven't connected with that person, I send them an email and they go into my CRM to be followed up with in typically about 30 days, depending on what the opportunity is. So I call it 135. From there, I have rolling call blocks. So every single week I have my CRM set. So I'm, Tuesday morning, right? I have an hour of time blocked and I just go to my HubSpot and here are all the calls for this week that have been scheduled that I should make. And I just start ripping through that list.
I'm a little more archaic than Nick's process. I kind of like it. I might have to borrow that idea. But no, as far as our standard buyers, we have a 72 touch point program as far as making that many connections with a specific buyer or seller throughout the year, and that's through either text, social media, emails, direct mail, things like that. But as far as how I look at it, because I'm on the side of the new business development specifically for our brokerage, I typically will follow up, with that initial phone call, exactly to Nick's point, leaving a voicemail. Typically, I'll follow up with a text, maybe 48 to 72 hours later. End of the week, maybe up to a week later, I'll call again. If at that point, then I'm not getting a response, that's typically just to Nick's point, I'll follow up with an email, and then from there, maybe another email a week later, and then they go back into the system, just kind of flow through. But through those communications, just something to add to both, I think, to both of our points, is that, at least for me, and I'm sure Nick would echo this, is that I try to drive that urgency as far as say, hey, I'm taking the time to reach out to you. I really would appreciate it if you get back to me. You showed interest in X, Y, or Z, or you want to talk about this or that, and kind of trying to elevate that level of acknowledgement, because I want to know either you're just here to waste time and you just whatever, you're just fishing around for brokers, you're not going to call anyone back, or oh hey, you know what, something came up and I'm busy, so I know how serious you are about working with us and working on a transaction, and I know where to categorize that person or that group or investment group or whatever it may be, so that I'm not just hounding you and bothering you over, if you selected somebody else or something came up. So I want to make sure I understand where I'm at with that person, that buyer, that seller, because that's important to me. It's closure to me is extremely important. Just like closing deals, I need closure with people and know where I stand with them to ensure that we know where we're going.
With that and making calls and staying in front of people, persistence pays in this business, right? You could have one person. Any of you out there is trying to find a deal. I bet you if you've looked at deals, there's one person that you've talked to that you should probably follow up with every 3 months for one reason or another, right? I have people, so in these lists that I have, right, before I'm going to make any calls, I think about what am I going to talk to this person about? Am I going to share relevant information, right? Am I going to tell them about a building that recently sold in the area that I have a comp, right? I can tell them they got, a 10-year lease at $6, right? Or the building sold for $75 a foot. What am I going to talk to them about? Or have they shared something personal with me, like the dude's a huge Packers fan, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about how terrible of a game it was, or whatever the situation is, you want to find a way to relate to these people, and then you keep them in rotation, okay? This. Again, brokerage isn't a tough problem to solve. It's just staying in front of people over and over and over. I mean, I think the longest cold call that I made earlier this year, I went back in my emails. I had first cold called this person. It was April of 2014. I sold them a building in March of this year. It was 9 years. Of staying, I called the person twice a year for 9 years, and I sold them a building. I made 40 grand, whatever it was. But again, this is a long game. You have to stay in front of people.
All right, last question. How does somebody get started? How do they hear about a deal? What's step one?
It depends on what you're looking to do, right? So there's different paths as far as real estate investing or real estate as a whole. Obviously, Nick's path in the industrial real estate, our path in the residential and multifamily real estate. There's also a commercial path as far as commercial real estate as well. But as far as getting started, identify what you want to do, right? If you like the art of the deal, but you don't really want to go get licensed. You like the off-market stuff. You like putting together, real estate deals, with different investors, things like that. There's that path. There's syndication deals. There's getting your license, things like that. But I'd say the first step into getting started is look at your phone, open it up, and look who's in there, right? So look who's in your phone book. Try to get any sort of connection to what you're looking to do and what you're looking to achieve, and sit down with those people. And then it's like a spider web. It's going to start kind of opening up and directly connecting you to other people, and you're going to get deeper and deeper into that channel, and then you're going to really eventually find the way of like either who you want to work with, who you want to partner with, what you want to do, and that'll help you identify it. But really starting with your own network would be my advice, as far as going through the phones, going through your contacts, and it's really truthfully about networking. And then eventually I'm sure it can lead you at an event like this, and so on and so forth, to talk to and collaborate with like-minded individuals.
Real estate is a team sport. Okay, so you just said collaboration. A lot of you out here are, flying solo, which is awesome. The fact that you're here, you're 99% higher than everybody else. All the guys that talk about it and, read blogs and shit online, and they're not here. They didn't pay to play. So you check the first box. Like, good for you guys. But I always say, show me a professional athlete that doesn't have a team around them. Right, even if they're somebody that Michael Phelps swims, or Lance Armstrong bikes, or even if they're solo athletes, they have trainers and nutritionists, and they have coaches and people around them that are advising them and helping them. And real estate's the same thing, even if you're rolling by yourself. I get calls all the time of people that want to invest in industrial real estate. It's tough to get started because the price points are so high. If you could show me a starter building for less than $800,000 or $1 million in our market, I would love to see it, right? So think about your LTV, think about your rates, think about your equity raise to get something like that off the ground. It's really tough to do. So for guys that are or girls that are just getting started, partner with somebody, right? Be the sweat equity that somebody else needs. I know Bill kind of joked yesterday that he doesn't need somebody to do anything but find him a deal. That doesn't mean that you can't invest with somebody like Bill, the smart asset guys, for example. So I've sold them a lot of real estate. We started buying, I think the first deal was $600,000, right? Now they've grown to own $12 million in real estate, something like that. Your first deal could be investing passively with a group, right? So take your 25 grand or your 50 grand, or raise the money from your friends, whatever it is, and you can bring that into a deal. So it's a great way, find a syndicator like these guys. You can come into a deal that they have going on. You can learn the ropes. You can see the OMs. You can see the numbers, how distributions work. Like, a lot of these operators, they'll show you the books, right? You're entitled as an investor to see how they do all of this stuff. So if you really want a crash course in seeing how these deals go and how successful people run them, invest with somebody like these guys, and you get a first-hand look at it.
Great point.
See what we did there?
That was not a paid advertisement.
Good. Well done.